Besa ma'ab, well-weld, when mefeskadus, ahadu amlak, amin. Besa ma'ab, well-weld, when mefeskadus, ahadu amlak, amin. Besa ma'ab, well-weld, when mefeskadus, ahadu amlak, amin. Give thanks, good morning, blessed love. Yeah, I hope everyone's keeping blessed. I'm looking forward to my day today, God willing. I'm off to Somerset to give a talk to teachers across Somerset about Rastafari, the Rastafari faith and its beliefs, about the emperor living in the southwest of England during his time in exile, and different examples of his stay, particularly in the southwest, and also particularly talking about how Rastafari can be taught across the curriculum. And I'll be sharing different examples across different subject areas. So I'm looking forward to that day and meeting the teachers and also hearing their questions and conversation. So yeah, and doing the Bible reading is a good way to set me up for the day and get me in the spirit. So I'll start with the reading, chapter 40 of Genesis. And it comes to pass after these things, the butler of the king of Egypt and the baker have sinned against their lord, against the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh is angry against his 2 eunuchs, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers, and puts them in confinement in the house of the chief of the executioners, into the round house, the place where Joseph is a prisoner. And the chief of the executioners charges Joseph with them, and he serves them, and they are in confinement for some days. And they dream a dream, both of them, each of his dream in one night, each according to the interpretation of the dream. The butler and the baker, whom the king of Pharaoh has, who are prisoners in the round house. And Joseph comes to them in the morning and sees them, and behold, they are morose. And he asks Pharaoh's eunuchs, who are with him in confinement in the house of the Lord, saying, Why are your faces sad today? And they say to him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph says to them, Are interpretations not with God? Please recount to me. And the chief of the butlers recounts his dream to Joseph, and says to him, In my dream, then behold, a vine is before me, and in the vine are 3 branches, and it is as it were flourishing, gone up has its blossom. Its clusters have ripened grapes. And Pharaoh's cup is in my hand, and I take the grapes and press them into the cup of Pharaoh, and I give the cup into the hand of Pharaoh. And Joseph says, This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days, yet within 3 days Pharaoh lifts up your head and has put you back in your station. And you have given the cup of Pharaoh into his hand, according to the former custom when you were his butler. Surely you have remembered me with you when it is well with you. You have pleased done kindness with me, and you have made mention to me of Pharaoh. Then you have brought me out from this house. For I was really stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they have put me in the pit for. And the chief of the bakers sees that he has interpreted good, and he says to Joseph, I am in the dream, and behold, 3 baskets of white bread are on my head, and in the highest basket are all kinds of Pharaoh's food, work for baker, and the birds are eating them out of the basket from my head. And Joseph answers and says, This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days, yet within 3 days Pharaoh lifts up your head from off you, and has hanged you on a tree, and the birds have eaten your flesh from off you. And it comes to pass on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he makes a banquet to all his servants, and lifts up the head of the chief of the butlers, and the head of the chief of the bakers amongst his servants. And he puts back the chief of the butlers to his butlership, and he gives the cup up into the hand of the Pharaoh. And the chief of the bakers he has hanged, and as has Joseph interpreted them. And the chief of the butlers has not remembered Joseph, but forgets him. For these few words I give thanks, blessed love. So I tripped up a few times there, but hopefully you still followed the story. So just to recap, it's a very short chapter. So Joseph's still in prison, and he's still kind of superintendent of the prisoners and making sure they're okay. And the Pharaoh's butler and baker have angered the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has sent them into prison. And the night they're in prison, they both have dreams that disturbs them, and then in the morning, Joseph can see they're disturbed and ask them their dreams. And so the butler says his dream was that he had a drink, the vines, and it produced wine, and he gave it to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh took the drink. And the baker's dream was that he had a basket on his head of bread, and birds were eating the bread off the basket. And Joseph said, well, interpretations belong to God. But the dream of the butler is that in 3 days there were 3 vines. So in 3 days the Pharaoh's going to come good for you and release you from prison. And that does happen. And he says to the baker, your basket of 3 bits of bread that are eaten by the birds, sadly, that means that in 3 days you're going to be executed and beheaded. And that does happen as well. So Joseph was correct on both dreams, but crucially to the butler, he said, when you're released in 3 days' time, do remember me. Remember that I came good on my interpretation. Remember that I was kind to you. And don't forget me, because I've been put in this pit without doing anything wrong. My brothers have sold me off. So he says, please do remember me. And the butler says, yeah, of course I remember you. But then the last sentence, it says, the chief of the butlers has not remembered Joseph, but forgets him. So it ends there. So it's it's a short chapter. It's very kind of clear, I think, in its narrative, and showing Joseph to be a kind person. Even when he's still a prisoner, he's still helping others. So it shows his kindness. It also shows his faith in God still. He says interpretations are for God, or interpretations lie with God, and then tell me your dream. So he's got an intimate relationship with God. So he's not saying he is God, but he's close enough to God to be able to give these interpretations, and he's got that faith in God, knowing that he's got those insights. And he successfully interprets both dreams. So he's still remaining very faithful. And also kind of patient as well. Like I said yesterday, there's a kind of a calmness about Joseph that kind of comes through his actions. So it'd be interesting, now seeing that he's been ignored or forgotten and still remains in jail, how that then plays out. I think the other thing about this chapter is about God's timing, because God is still with him, and he's blessing not only Joseph but also the prison guard, the chief of the roundhouse, and also the Pharaoh, because Joseph is residing in these spaces, and it said yesterday God has blessed those spaces for Joseph to reside within. But what God's not doing is releasing Joseph from prison, when you would have thought that would have been an easy thing to do. So what this really shows is there's a time for everything. When the time is right, Joseph will be released, and then something else will happen, but it has to happen at the right time. So there's a patience here as well, that Joseph keeps his faith in God, but knowing he will be released, and he's sowing these seeds, do not forget me when you get out there. But he's still got faith in God. And we saw impatience in the earlier chapters. I think this is the crucial thing as well. In earlier chapters, we saw deceit. We saw humans taking timing into their own hands, as it were. Whereas Joseph is kind of, in a way, waiting on God's time, but doing good by people and being good by people, and then having the faith that that's going to come through in the end. So yeah, interesting chapter. I mean, there's more that can be reasoned on that strategy in life. When is the time to fight back and kick and rebel and take matters into your own hands? And you don't always know what God's time is, because sometimes it does take that action. But I guess ingenuity, your inner voice, inner faith, praying on it will tell you when the time is right to do these things, really. And we know when sometimes we act as like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done it like that, and you get regret. So just praying on things, thinking about things, meditating, and then acting when it feels right, and all the dots are joined up. Often there's an inner voice that tells us when the time is right to do something, really. And Joseph definitely seems to be in that spirit. So I'll end the reading here. Have a blessed day. And God willing, you all remain healthy, and I look forward to further readings and reasonings to come. Blessed love. Give thanks.